What is up, everybody? We are live, Secret Show episode number 14 in the house. We've got a very special guest. Now, I will preface, he is working tonight, so if we lose him because, we hear gunshots or something, he'll come back. So, because it's not him getting shot at. So, guys, this is my good friend, Doug Kirchner. And he was a speaker at Take on the World 19. And he's been my friend since I don't know. Let's talk about that. Because, were you really my friend? Because you were really just interested in my sister, right? We were classmates.
Wait a minute. You have to bring that one up.
Right?
Come on now.
Yeah, right? Yeah, so if my sister...
remember, I'm also 3-4 years older than you?
No, you're not that much older than me. You're like 3 years older, maybe.
Wait, you're 41 now, right?
Hey! This is the Secret Show. We keep a lot of secrets, man. So
I'm turning. Gosh, am I gonna be 44?
44. Like I said, 3 years older. Yeah. So, yeah, because you were a couple years older. We were in the same class, and I remember you wanted to come sleep over at my house when we went to Cedar Point. And it was really, so hopefully you could ride rides with my sister.
You invited me. I didn't say, hey, let me come spend the night at your house so I can go drive on your Cedar Point trip.
Right? Yeah.
You're like, hey, Doug, what was his name? Was the guy that you used to hang out with me? I was like the third, or was he?
I'm losing you a little bit. Yeah, you're coming in every other word. I'm losing you.
You're losing me?
There we go. Now I got you.
All right. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can. But yeah, so what's going on? Well, needless to say, everybody
just working, doing my thing.
Well, needless to say, I've known you for a long, long time, and what was really cool when I started getting into the Christian music scene, really late in the game, I actually was booking a concert, and I kind of ran into you again after we had been friends for this whole time, and you had left the school and we had parted ways, and we never connected ever again until I believe it was 2006 is when we reconnected again.
Around there.
Well, I think that's when it was, right?
It was either 2005 or 2006. I can't remember.
Yeah, 2005. You're right. For Virtual Frequency Tour. So I was booking DJ Maj, Pigeon John, and it was supposed to be Marzil, and they couldn't make it because they were having a baby or something. And you were managing MG the Visionary.
Yep.
So if you guys are out there and you guys are hearing all this, those are some old school Christian hip hop names from way back in the day. And DJ Maj just Toby Max DJ, which was really cool. But and I'm like, hey, I'm interested in MG and all this stuff. And it's like, hey, you don't happen to be Doug Kirchner, or the guy who went to so-and-so Christian school. And you're like, yeah. And that started, this whole thing all over again. And, we'll probably talk a little bit about, what you talked about at Take on the World just in a little bit. But, why don't you tell everybody, what you've done? Because if you guys don't know, this is the man responsible for Jeremiah Dirt being pretty much in all of our lives right now. If Jeremiah Dirt is on your radar and you've been blessed by him and, been ministered, to or by him, Doug is the guy that, connected me to him. And, we are so thankful for that because obviously we love Dirt so much. And, this was all the doing of my relationship with Doug. And Doug has a fantastic story of of the Christian music scene. So why don't you share a little bit about your testimony when you came to Christ, and what you've done, for gosh, going on probably close to 30 plus years of your life.
Well, I first became saved when I was probably around 8 years old, but actually living was probably about 19. I How I got into the music industry was simply I got kicked out of Christian Center, and bad memories, bad memories. But I was being homeschooled by my dad, which was like, hey, read this book and do your thing, and I'll grade it later. So I had lots of time on my hand. So I ended up hearing about a Michael W. Smith DC Talk concert coming in, and I ended up calling Forefront Records to interview DC Talk for what was known at the time was a Christian music magazine called the Wedge Music Magazine. And they didn't realize I was like 12 or 13 years old at the time. It was like in 89. I can't remember how old I was then. So I'm doing I get this interview. The Wedge Music Magazine calls in like a week after I did to try to get.
You're like 14. You're 14 years old at this point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. Keep that in mind.
And so I ended up getting tried to get the interview. They were told by the record company that some guy named Doug Kirchner got the interview for the magazine, and they're like, he doesn't work for us. We don't even know who he is. And so I ended up getting a call from that magazine, and they said, look, you're a punk kid, but we're going to let you write the interview. So I ended up going out and doing the interview with DC Talk, and oddly enough, Michael W. Smith with John Palmer, who was a radio disc jockey at the time in the area. And he drove me because obviously I couldn't drive. I was young. And DC Talk thought it was one of the coolest things that they had ever had happen at that time to them, that they had this young kid who seemingly lied to get into a show that he just wanted to go see. And so we ended up interviewing, then going out to dinner, and I got to hang out with Toby and Kevin that night for a very long time. So that kicked off my career in music. What ended up happening like a few months later is there were no bands that I liked that were actually coming in to doing shows. So I got bored. I booked the band Bride, which was my first show in 89. It was on Halloween of 89 in Kent State area.
We'll forgive you for doing that on Halloween now.
Well, it was an outreach, man. It was an outreach. Kent State at the time, or the city, used to have a huge satanic Halloween parade and all that stuff. So we were trying to reach out to the community there, and we had the band Bride. Well, needless to say, one, I wasn't old enough to get into the venue. Two, Bride pulled in and was like, who's the promoter? And I showed my hand, and they said, well, we're not getting out of the van. We're just going to leave. And so I showed them the money, and I paid them up front. They walked into so that kicked it off. I worked in the Christian and mainstream concert promoting end for 25 plus years. And I've done over 2,000 concerts. I've worked with everybody from, as far as Christian goes, from Michael W. Smith, Striper, to secular bands as Snoop Dogg, Eminem, all pretty much before they were huge, huge people. So it's been a wild ride, and I pretty much no longer exist in that community for except for the close friends that I have within the industry, like Dirt, and pretty much some of the heavy metal bands like Deliverance and Tourniquet, and yeah, some Bride stuff. But it's been a long, crazy ride.
Yeah, and you owned your own record label
Yeah.
for a stint there, and you kicked off a lot of huge bands that ended up doing some big things outside of you. And yeah, I mean, some of those guys are Zayo. You know, they were a big hard rock band,
We had
metal band.
Zayo, Juliana Theory. Pretty much it was more Juliana Theory than Zayo.
Mm-hmm.
I helped out with Zayo in between Tom Dunn working with them and Steadfast Records, and them officially signing the Tooth and Nail. But I worked with Zayo on a regular basis, promoting shows, booking tours. But signed to No Compromise at one point was the Juliana Theory, John Rubin, Sincerely, which was members of a band called Pep Squad, and Sunny Day Real Estate. We had Stairwell, which was members of the Tones, Bloodshed, all these big name Tooth and Nail bands. And then again, Doug's early to the party, but early leaving, because the bands that I had, no one knew that they were going to blow up like they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so Juliana Theory got huge. The guys from Stairwell and broke up. And you had like the guy Neil Samoy, who played in Stave Saker, played in other bands. You had Kevin Chen, who was in Supertones, and they all just went their separate ways. But that's an even crazier time. I had Narcissus, which was a big underground a Christian metal band. I mean, so many people came through that end.
Well, you mentioned somebody already in there, and so how early on did you meet Tom Dunn? Because we're all from Ohio, and he's from the Mansfield, Ohio area, and how early on did you meet Tom, and how did that relationship get started?
I want to say I met Tom either in 90 or 91. And he came to my shows, and he was passing out literature because he had a ministry that he was dealing with vampirism and the occult.
So he's been doing Through the Black basically forever.
Since I've known the guy.
Right, and I'm rocking the Tom Dunn Through the Black T-shirt. I think there's a discount right now for any Resist gear, which was the hoodies, the T-shirts. They got a new decal, so go to throughtheblack.com and pick up all that stuff. Go support Tom, Jared. Dirt's with those guys. Lexi Hall, she's with Created Equal, does some stuff with them as well. So man, they're just such good friends, and yeah, it's crazy. When I started talking to you again, and then I started seeing this Detestable documentary pull up, and you're going, yeah, that's my friend Tom Dunn from way back when. And you're like, we don't really talk because we disagree on like politics, like Glenn Beck or something. You guys always fought about Glenn Beck and Alex Jones.
Alex Jones and Glenn Beck, yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, those are the good old days.
I'm a Beck guy. He was a Jones guy, so
yeah.
But me and Tom have been able to make up, and we, we've always, me and Tom were like at some point running after each other. Another point we're hugging and we're conspiring. So I love that guy. Being friends with him for as long as I have, it's, I would have to say, out of all the people that I know still to this day, he's one of the main constants.
Yeah, he's genuine, and man, I'll tell you, that gives him so much credibility. It's like he didn't just jump into, fighting darkness. This has been something he's been doing for a long time, and he
Right.
just took his ministry to another level. Going full time with it. So, man, that's I didn't even know that. That he went to those shows and was promoting against the occult and trying to get people out of that stuff for a long
Now
time.
I've seen Tom with black hair, no hair, dreadlocks, and long hair like he has now. I mean, he's up there and he's trying. See, I think he has a conscience of he wants to look younger, but we're all getting older. But I wish I had his hair. I wish I could do that. I'm too
Yeah,
old.
right.
But no,
Yes.
he is the real deal. If there's anybody that I can honestly say is the real deal, Dunn's the real deal. He's always had a heart for the subculture of where the church isn't going at all.
Yeah. He's been definitely doing this for a long time, and which is super awesome. I mean, yeah, we're glad that he said yes 2017 to come to take on the world, and ever since then, big shout out to you. You were the first guy that offered to do security for us in 2017, and you did it, and you were there that whole weekend and our first year. So if any of you guys came to take on the world, you probably met Doug in 2017 for doing the security, and then you showed up 2018 for a little bit on the last day, and then you were here on Friday night and Saturday of 2018, and you gave your testimony, which we'll be going into in a little bit here. But yeah, so we want to thank you, and there's so many people that probably that we're starting a little late, so they're probably not seeing you on here, and you made a lot of good friends, and one of those people you met in 2018 was the first time you had met this person, but you've run in his circles for forever, which was Alan Aguirre. It's like you didn't even cross paths with Alan all your whole entire career. When you were doing the same exact stuff, you were just missing them at shows, and it just never clicked. So how was it meeting the man, the myth, the legend, Alan Aguirre?
He holds up to everything that I've ever heard. No, you know what? Alan Aguirre, growing up in the Christian music scene, he was always one of those elusive people that I knew. A lot of people that knew him, or we still know each other, that we still know people that are in the same circle, and it was just weird that I never got even a chance to see Scattered Few, let alone meet Alan Aguirre. So it was like one of the weirdest, I guess, fanboy moments of 18 when I came to take on the world. And one, it was really just to pick up dirt because I had to take him to the airport a day or so later. But oddly enough, because I was working a suicide case that weekend, and you were all mad at me for not being able to do
I was really mad at you.
But the thing with Alan was he lived up to what I had heard who he was. But the one thing I can say, just like with Alan, just like with Tom, Alan is who he is, and he's always been that guy.
Yeah.
Who he may have a different outlook or have a different perspective on how ministry is done, but that's who he is.
Yeah, he's a real genuine
That's how he does it.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to read his Feast Unlocked book?
You know what, man? I have tried to read other books while I'm in the process of getting my master's degree in criminology. So when I'm done, I've got 5 more weeks to go. I'll be able to read actual books that I want to read and care to read.
Right.
Then.
Yeah, and you got that book at the conference, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So I knew you picked that up. So
he made me pay for it. I mean, I would think after all the albums that I've bought over the years and, pushed, he didn't, he
didn't even hook you up, right?
No.
But he didn't even know you, but yet some of your best friends are some of his best friends, which is so comical and funny,
Well, one of the people that we have in common that are like really close to is Jimmy Brown from Deliverance. And I guess Alan called Jimmy to see if I was full of crap. So, or something like that, because Jimmy had told me, "Hey, Alan Aguirre called me trying to look up on you. What's up with that?" And so we talked, and I said, "Dude, we met at a flat Earth convention," and he started laughing. He goes, "Well, Victor Macias, the bass player for Deliverance, he's a flat Earth guy, so he's all into that stuff." And so it's funny, those circles. It's weird how we're running all into each other.
Right. So if you guys don't know, the book that we're talking about that Doug has not read yet is called The Feast Unlocked, and that is, you could pick that up. It's on, I believe, Blue Planet Media. .com is his website, which I make fun of all the time because it says planet, right? So so hey, we love Alan, and hey, it's all good. So yeah, continue moving on, because how'd you get connected to Dirt?
Dirt was one of those. I had worked a lot with the band POD, doing shows, doing shows with POD, with them, helping. And they had this weird rapping guy that was with them at Cornerstone 97. And I ended up, I was on my honeymoon, and I ended up meeting this cat who he just looked like he came from another planet. About 90 pounds wet, and he just seemed like this very interesting guy who I from the moment that we met, connected. Oddly enough, we bought his demo that he had. I think it was a maybe 4-song or 5-song demo or pre-release of Plague that was coming out on Rescue Records. My wife at the time really liked them, so we bought the disc, and on the disc was a phone number. We traded phone numbers, and when I was setting up No Compromise Records, I knew that he was having issues with the record company he was on, and I ended up we ended up, me and him, it was weird because we used to talk every night for about 2-3 hours a night, and we just became like really good friends, and then became, I would say, brothers. I mean,
yeah, he lived with you.
Yeah, at one point, him and his family at the time lived with us. They moved up here from San Diego in the middle of us doing a tour. So we did the first leg of the tour, which took us from Cleveland down to like the East Coast and down to Florida and on back. And when we got home from that, he jumped on an airplane, flew back to San Diego, loaded a U-Haul truck, drove across the country in about, I think it was a week. We unloaded the truck. He dropped us later. We were in a like that made any sense to any of us, but that's how you booked tours back then. You just played where you could get a show. and get paid to do a show. Not that we actually got paid, because like most Christian promoters and even me back then, you expected the bands to fall in line with ministry instead of money. And so, but
And you guys were really doing a lot of ministry back then,
yes,
you know, you know, different than what you see today. You got the big shows. Every artist today, it's like they book a show and, it's a big event and it's got the lights, it's got this, it's got all these, all these perfect elements to it. But you guys were just going anywhere you could go. And then afterwards, praying with people and preaching the gospel to people and just loving on them and meeting them right where they were at. That's what you guys were doing, and the church was not even supporting you guys half the time.
I can honestly say one of the only churches that supported us wasn't any church that we went to or were part of, but it was a church in West Virginia. And my friend Mick Cox, the bass player for the band Zayo, they had a church that would bring us in on every tour so we could get some starting capital to make sure that we had money for gas and food for the tour.
Mm-hmm.
And we would make enough on those shows that it would supply us for at least a week to 2 weeks of gas money and food money for us. So we weren't having to spend the money that, spending the $200 or $100 that we would get paid doing a show in Virginia versus Celebration Church in West Virginia. So no church really sponsored us. No church was ever really behind us. But I was going to say that the one show that sticks out from all the shows that we toured on was me, Dirt, and my friend Andre. We drove Spokane, Washington, and show in Tacoma, and we hung out with MG the Visionary there and recorded a song that never got released for Tooth and Nail. And then the next night we played a show in Portland in a basement of this wretched, dirty house that used to host all these shows. And it was it was a Tooth and Nail kind of sponsored house shows. And we played with, I'm going to get their name wrong, but I believe it was the Deadsies and the Cooties, which were members of MXPX. And there was about 200 people shoved in this basement, and Dirt was hanging on to the rafters of the basement, and because that's where we played. And we ended up staying that whole time after that show, talking and praying with people until there was no one else to talk to or pray with. Yeah. And we were the only one that did ministry that night.
Wow.
So,
well, you can see a lot of the a lot of those bands that you mentioned, they've either turned away from the faith, they're not active in the faith, they've just given up on it altogether.
I would say out of the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, coming up to even now, a lot of the bands that were back then or even now are closer to being agnostic, or they have some belief, but they don't really want to be preachy.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I think that the pulpit that you use to spread your music as a Christian should be spread doing ministry.
Yeah, I'll take this opportunity just to say it. Look, we could say whatever we want about the next guy I'm going to talk about, which is Kanye. He's got the number one album in the world right now. Jesus is King. Okay. And, we could look at him. We could post memes about him all day, about all the things that he's done wrong in his life, all the occult stuff he's been connected to. Look, I don't know I don't know where he truly stands, but if he's not motivating us, just like we watch Jehovah Witnesses walk up and down the street, zealously teaching and preaching what they believe, and that should be motivating us to go do the same thing, to go share him with the world. Kanye should be doing the same thing to every artist who claims Christ as their savior, to not be afraid, because look, his album is called Jesus is King. He's dropping Yeshua in there too, if you didn't know that, right? In the song, he even says Yeshua, and he's in Jimmy Kimmel. He's on these things, and these words are being uttered out of their mouth. And he may be a false prophet. He may be all those things that everybody's saying. Look, but he should be motivating us as true believers to go do what he's actually doing, even if it's on the surface. And all those artists should be like, you know what? I don't need to hide his name. I don't need to conform to this world. I need to go and share him with the world. And you know what? All those artists. I mean, you look at like Lecrae, right? Lecrae used to be this, Christ in every line, to social justice. All those other topics became his focus, and even him, he almost walked away from his faith fully, and then he's come back to it. If you didn't know that, read his articles, and that should motivate Lecrae to say, you know what, I need to get back to teaching the word, teaching the Bible, teaching the truth to the world, and not be ashamed of it, right? I mean, they call themselves 116. I'm unashamed of the gospel. But if you listen to any of their music over the last 5 or 6 years, you go, it seems like you guys are unashamed of the gospel because you don't talk about it anymore, right? And if you can, Lecrae should be doing that to us. I mean, we're called Take on the World. I mean, look, we need to get out there and reach some people. We don't need to be preaching and teaching in just our little circles and in our little groups. And then we have the truth and the knowledge, and that's all we've got, So I don't know. I mean, maybe you can share some thoughts on that, but it's interesting to watch all this right now, for sure.
Right. So Kanye, in my opinion, I had happened, and honestly, my whole main thought is who does he have himself surrounded by? Who is shepherding him? Because he's brand new. He's baby. He should be getting taught and getting fed meat instead of trying to feed meat to those who are surrounding him. But on that note, I saw a video, and I posted it, I think it was yesterday, about how he was talking to Kim and how he said, I don't want my wife dressing the way you dress. It's not pleasing to God, and it pleases me in the flesh, but it's not pleasing to God, and that should be left between me and you. Now, you're talking to a Kardashian, and unfortunately, it ended with her saying, "You're walking out your journey. Let me do mine." And when you have somebody like Kanye, who is a baby in Christ,
right?
And
we'd hope so, right? I mean, he is talking out against pornography. He's talking out against abortion. He's talking out against premarital sex. Yeah.
He called himself out. He says he's responsible for a lot of the bad things that have happened within the culture, within society, because of who he was. Now, I can't judge a man's heart. And honestly, when I look at Kanye, I see repentance. I do. But we also have seen it in other people like Bob Dylan. We've seen it in, Brian Head Welch and Fieldy from Korn. The thing that I have an issue with those kind of guys is that Brian Head Welch left Korn because of certain things, and he got saved, and he was against some of the songs that they were doing because it was just wrong, and he did not agree. agree with it or doing those same songs. Again, can't judge a man's heart. I'm not even judging his ministry. I knew Brian back in the day, haven't really talked to him in a long time. So all I'm going to say on that note is if there's fruit from the ministry, whether he's doing good or bad, and there's good fruit coming from it, because God will honor anything that he wants. So same with Kanye. If Kanye is bearing good fruit, but not really who he says he is now, or I've read memes and stuff like that he's worshiping a counterfeit Jesus because it's not. I don't know. Some of the stuff has been weird at what I've been reading, so it's hard to say because we don't know who Kanye is. We don't know who he's worshiping with or who's behind him, holding him up spiritually right now. Mm-hmm. So the reality is that it's a wait and see. I think we jump on the bandwagon way too quick on crucifying him about becoming saved and not changing his life quick enough, or we've crucified him in the aspect of he's out preaching. Mm-hmm. And I'll say I was doing it too, but I just want to wait and see. He's done more in the last month with the release of his album and coming out of now than some of the biggest Christian artists in the mainstream right now.
Yeah. Well,
and go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to read this comment. I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, maybe we shouldn't be, as believers, we shouldn't be, promoting them, right? Obviously praying for them. Look, I'm somebody who knows all of these things, like you go back to like his power video. I mean, where it is his indoctrination into Freemasonry. It is hands down that stuff. I mean, you've got Kim with pictures with Marina Abramovich. She's been part of Spirit Cooking, things, all their connections. Obviously, Kanye was extremely connected, same labels as Jay-Z. So, I mean, he's done all of this stuff, been around all these people. So I get it. I've seen it all. So I'm not like giving this like, hey, this past, we know the Jesus Bible, we know all those things. I get them all. I seen them all. I know them all. We were looking at this stuff well before any of these things happened. My whole point again was, what he's doing. I mean, just like what we see with, Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, and they're going door to door and they're doing stuff. I mean, Mormons send their young men on missionaries and women too. They send them on 2-year missions trips to go preach what they believe their gospel is to this world. Yet we train our kids in the church and youth groups full of pizza and games, and then they come out and go to secular schools, and we wonder why our faith's missing. And then we got terrible theology, which runs away from God's laws and all these things, and yet we don't do what these people are even doing. Like, we throw it away. So I say, use this as an opportunity. I see all these people going online and bashing Kanye. Instead of bashing Kanye, go out and preach Yeshua to the world. Go reach someone. Get out of your house. Go meet someone. Go have what the Father has for you to do. Use that as a motivation. I mean, I see that as, for myself, as this huge gut punch. Like, he can do this, and if he's wrong, but he's doing the things we all need to be doing. And we don't do it. We're just going to sit back and stand there and like wear watchmen on the wall and just post all these memes and do all these things. But yet we've been called to go preach that great commission to this world, go out and disciple people, baptize them in his name. We don't do any of that stuff as a body, it's easy for me to say, oh, well, I do something. I put on Take on the World conference where 500, 600 people have showed up at, and we do all these things. We got great teaching. That's easy to do. What the hard thing is to go out, have those relationships with people, meet them where they're at, and love them and disciple them and spend time, teaching them who Yeshua is, right? We don't do that stuff on a daily basis. And here's Kanye, he's proclaiming, all the things we need to be proclaiming every day to this world. I mean, we do it in our tight-knit groups, we don't want to break out of there, It's like, we got to remember, it's like, yeah, we're not of this world, but we're in this world. And, let's use this thing as to take on this world. And that's been the thing that I've seen, which has motivated me to, make everything we do more about reaching the lost for him. And, if that's not our mission, but our mission is to like post Kanye memes about, all the evil stuff he's done in the past, we're missing the boat. I mean, yeah, let's make sure let's not be promoting this guy like, hey, he's the second coming, of Christ, like some people are doing. And we pray for him. And, that's a really good point, and, the big question is, why don't we do, you've done it for all those years, in the Christian music industry. You took dirt, and it's like, just like at all those shows, it's like all you were there to do was to meet those people where they're at and minister to them, right? That was your whole thing. And why can't we get back to that? Because the Christian music industry doesn't do it anymore. Churches don't do it anymore,
Well, I'll tell you why we can't get back to it. Because we live in an outraged culture now that is allowing the devil to have a stronghold within our church community. And, like I said, the Kanye situation is a wait and see. We can't judge whether he dressed. You can't hold somebody accountable for something that they may not realize is the wrong thing to do. I mean, I'll say it. Me and you have had this discussion about dressing up for Halloween and doing all that stuff. Regardless,
I might have to mute. I may have to mute you here.
It's about a change in the heart and allowing God to do the work. Like I said, Kanye's a baby. Kanye needs to be able to grow up without being attacked for every little thing that he does. Because let me tell you something. I've been in the music industry. I've been in Hollywood. I've been all over that scene. Christian, secular. I've been in places that most people don't even get to even think about going to. And I've had weird stuff go on at the clubs that I worked in. And I'll say this. If Kanye is truly who he says he is and says how God is changing his soul, you got to give him that time for it to actually take place. Like I said, Kanye shouldn't be preaching, but he also shouldn't stay silent. And the one thing that he just did, number one album or not, is that he put a target on his back for everybody that once supported him for who he was. And now I could tell you that if or the satanic end of the music industry really wants to take him down, they've tried. They have tried so hard to make Kanye look like a fool. They've tried to make him look crazy, and at points he probably was, because that's how Satan works within this industry. If you are trying to actually change your life and make a betterment instead of doing what they want you to do, they will make you look crazy. Yep. They will destroy who you are to everybody. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that, I'm not going to try to make a prediction or not, but I'm going to say probably will end up losing his family. If this is real, either Kim will get on board and be there for him and be there for their family, or he's going to lose them, and that'll be a sure sign of what's actually going on with their family and who he and with as a Christian.
Yeah, you know, that's one thing everybody needs to pray for, you know, because you know, if you look at the culture of the degradation of women, you know, obviously it's been going on for a long time, but it's just manifested even more when Kim Kardashian stepped onto the scene. Somebody with no talent, really, you know, not have dog in her or something like that, as everybody does, but she didn't come out with a talent that she had. Why she is in the limelight, other than her looks, her body figure, all of these things, which has now made young women and you know, children think that this is what they need to look like, they need to be like, and it has impacted the culture so intensely that if she actually just started to listen to her husband and preach modesty and actually be modest for the first time in her life, not say you can't look beautiful, not say you can't look pretty, but if she actually covered and changed up those things and actually taught women how to be women, and that would change the landscape of a lot of things we're seeing. And you know, because if he's going to go on these rants talking about pornography, I mean, you just go to her Instagram page or you go to those things and you see this stuff and you're like, this is anything, you know, that is this is anti God, this is anti scripture, this is anti everything to do with the Bible. And yet if he's going to claim that and walk in that and be a hypocrite when he's already made it that pornography is destroying families and people, he, like you said, she can't continue, you know, looking that way, dressing that way, being that way, and putting that to the masses. A massive change and overhaul would have to change. If they're really serious about being good mothers and good fathers, as he talks about in his songs, that will change, and that will have to change. If not, he will have to leave that. And if he's sincere, you know, if you start seeing a mixture and a merger of those things, and that's what you need to watch for. If you continue to see that nothing is changing, nothing is moving. I mean, come on, he just started coming out with this stuff, you know, what, like, it's not even been a month basically, right? You know, so, you know, we got to see how this plays out, but could you just imagine the impact and the culture it would have, you know, on our young people in middle school, high school, elementary schools, when they start to see girls actually start to think that they're worth something. And maybe it's actually cool for young men not to think of women as pieces of meat, like all the Kardashians, their shows, their makeup, everything that they do teaches that, and they make money from that. And that's the most disgusting thing that we can actually see. And as believers, those are the things that we need to really watch and pray for, because we do want change to infect. And if someone like her actually made a change, even if she's not even a true believer, but did make those positive changes, it would have a huge impact on the culture. And I think that would be a great thing. So, you know, we can continue to pray for that kind of stuff. But
I think we just got to let God do what God does and allow the Holy Spirit to either change them or he doesn't change and it was all fake. I mean, you know, Kanye was going to sell a ton of records regardless if he was saved or not.
Well, his last few records haven't done what this album has done.
Well, that's because now I agree. And if he's a marketing guy. And so if this was all just marketing and pre-planning, then
Yeah, he's a true genius because he could take an album that's a gospel record and, you know, trick the world into thinking he's legit, right? Yeah, I mean that's some genius stuff on a whole nother level. But the genius that's behind him is an evil genius, right? And I mean, so that, I mean, those are I mean, where's that coming from?
Right.
You know, that's coming from a dark
But
place.
that
If
evil
that's the
genius,
case.
that evil genius is behind everybody, because, you know, I've known really good people in the industry to fall to something really, really stupid.
Well,
And the reality is, like, just what came out, what, in the last couple of days about the Christian comedian John Crist. It's sad, but you got to remember, we're not dealing with angels, we're not dealing with gods, we're dealing with human beings.
mhm.
We're dealing with people that have free will and have the right to choose what path they walk, whether it's going to be for God or if it's going to be for Satan.
Mhm.
And the reality is that because I come out and say that I'm gonna put out this Christian record, I mean, I've always questioned that. Like, I looked at Alice Cooper, I've looked at Dylan, I've looked at just other guys that have come out in the metal scene. And, you know, we got I forget his name, but the drummer for Iron Maiden. But I don't see it. How do you play for Iron Maiden? Now, granted, I am a huge Iron Maiden fan, I'm a huge Alice Cooper fan, but how do you play? I mean, I don't really listen to them anymore, but how do you play an Iron Maiden song that 666, it's quote a warning song or whatever, and have a dead guy by the name of Eddie as a cartoon character on your stage, and your whole symbolism is Egyptian gods as well as Satan, and do it as, throw that term around way too
Mhm. Well, I mean, let's look at,
easily
I mean,
anymore. You know,
let's look at the Christian
I've
industry. I mean, we've been seeing this
never been.
kind of symbolism for a long time, even in the Christian industry.
I can go as far, I mean, I can go as far back as what I can remember, and I'm not calling Michael W. Smith out, but the Big Picture album had symbolism, all Egyptian symbolism all over it. The Go West Young Man album had Egyptian symbolism and satanic symbolism all over it. POD, one of my friends, you know, they had satanic symbolism on their album. It's like, are they doing it purposely, or do they just not know? That's the question I have. And so the aspect of it all for me is that you see it in their heart, you see it in who they are. You know, when you
You look at even Amy Grant's, one of her first albums, where I believe she has backwards writing on the back of one of the albums,
yes,
and she has
I think that was her first real album that
yeah,
came out that was in the mainstream.
and she didn't have any say in that. That was all you know, somebody else who did that artwork. And most of the time you find out that's the case. You know, people, and everybody's so ignorant in a lot of these things, especially if you're in these labels, like, you know, a lot of people want to say, well, that's her indoctrination into, satanic Illuminati stuff. You know, you go back and you trace those things, and you go, are we, getting, is everything this way? And I'm saying a lot of it clearly is. I mean, both you and I know that, a lot of these things are connected, and they are doing these things purposely. Even in the metal world, we talk about it a lot. A lot of those bands, like a Slayer, who uses, these satanic symbols, right, on their stuff.
Right.
And, these guys aren't even Satanists in their lives, right?
No.
They don't even, now they're still probably following, um,
Well,
LaVeyan
I mean,
type of Satanism just by doing their own thing, but they're not worshiping, they're not Marilyn Manson, level on this stuff, but it's all like for a show, right? They just do this stuff for a show, and it's quite crazy how they can do that. Now, obviously, they're infected with satanic stuff around them because they're living worldly, right?
well, I mean, on a Slayer note, and I would even put Kanye in there, or Jay-Z, or Metallica, or even Celine Dion, Mariah Carey. There has always been in the mainstream market of music an aspect of, like Slayer, oh, we're just doing it to make money. But yeah, in essence, if you're doing it to make money, money is the root of all evil. So therefore, you're doing it maybe unknowingly worshiping money or worshiping Satan. You're doing it to pad your pockets, but at some point, what you don't believe in, you have to start believing, because you can't be within I would say within the satanic realm, you can't do it for too long before you start actually living it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anybody will tell you, and I'll say this, that knowing like Sonny from POD, there was a time, the reason why he cut his dreads off and all that stuff, because that was a thing of like the end of the way that he believed John the Baptist, the reason why they had dreads. Dirt even had them for that aspect. But it was when he knew that he had crossed the line, he had to cut him off, because he felt like he needed to cut him off, repent, and try to make right what he made wrong. And because that industry will eat you up quicker than any other industry. I mean, you could have a nothing band 1 minute. Okay, just for instance, I brought Creed in 1997, fall of 97, 98. It happened when I was living in Willoughby. And they ended up 2 weeks later becoming one of the biggest bands. 2 weeks before, they were staying in my living room in my apartment because their van broke down. It makes no sense to me that people have to automatically just say, these guys are evil, these guys are wrong, these guys are blah, 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 blah. We throw too many things like that around until you don't know who these guys are. You've never met these guys. You've never sat across from Scott Stapp. You've never sat across from Sonny from POD. And I've done the judging myself. Until you can sit and talk to them on a one-on-one basis and get to know the heart of the man, you can't judge them. Whether it be Kanye, whether it be Donald Trump, whether it be, any of these people, the heart of the man has to be seen through God's eyes, not ours.
And this is coming from a guy, if you guys don't know. So you've been at all these big festivals like Cornerstone Festival. You actually played in bands on those things. And your stories, I mean, I don't know how many you would like to share, but you've been around all these things and been around people who were fake, where the first place where most Christian artists end up falling into drugs were places like Cornerstone and some of these big festivals.
I smoked
right?
my first marijuana blunt at Cornerstone Festival behind the main stage in the green room with, I can't say who I was with.
Yeah, right. You almost said it, right?
But unfortunately, one of the guys is no longer with us. And I tripped on acid when I was there in 93. it's all
And half of these big bands, some of the really big bands that you thought were doing, true ministry, had these big addictions. I mean, you look back at DC Talk. It's no mystery. Kevin Smith of DC Talk. It's been written in books, so it's not gossip, right? He's dealt with drugs. I mean, Michael W. Smith dealt with drugs. I mean, that's well documented. You even mentioned that on Larry King. These are some like big, Michael W. Smith, a worship pastor, and if Michael W. Smith, his pastor, Alan Aguirre's got some great stuff because he's close with those guys, and he was teaching. He wrote a book on feast days, Sabbath, dietary instructions, like way back in the 90s. And this was a guy who was mentoring and pastoring, Michael W. Smith. So, a lot of people want to throw him under the bus. It's like, you don't even know who's been mentoring this guy, who he's been listening to. And here's the guy writing books on how all this stuff is relevant for us today. But no, we close ourselves so minded to that stuff because it may not look or feel exactly what we think everything should look or feel like, but yet they were teaching and seeing truth. So Michael W. Smith's been well exposed to Torah topics. He's been exposed to all that stuff.
You got to understand too that Guido, who was Michael W. Smith's pastor, DC Talk's pastor, Striper's pastor, POD's pastor. I know Michael Guido very well, and the guy's right on. But the music business spits you up. They eat you up and spit you out really quick. Touring schedules are brutal. You don't get a lot of sleep. You don't see your family. So when you are in that realm, the easiest way for the devil to tempt you is through drugs and through sex. And that's how some of these guys fall really quickly, because Guido has a family. Guido has his own, at one time, I don't know if he still does, had his own church, and he can't be with them 24/7. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about grown adults, so you can't babysit them. So the reality is that we are in a spot that, it's horrendous. I mean, even on the scales that I've done big tours, I've done small tours. And when Dirt will tell you that we were driving for 8 hours, setting up for a show, go back to the hotel, sleep for 2 hours, get back in the car, drive 12 to 15 hours to the next show, and you weren't in the right mind. By the end of now it wasn't our last tour, but almost was our last tour, but one of our tours, we didn't talk. He was living in my house. We didn't talk for almost 6 months. We did not talk because you got to a point where if you say anything, your friendship's over. And people don't realize how heavy this burden is. And I'm not making excuses for any of the artists. I'm not, all I'm saying is, the scripture, pull the plank out of your own eye before you try to do it to somebody else. I'm paraphrasing,
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, it's one that points it back to, what would our Messiah do? How would our Messiah respond? What would he do? Are we going to use this opportunity, like for Kanye, to go sit with the sinners, go sit with the lost and share him with them, or are we going to lead with every single thing else? Are we going to lead with hey, be on the street corners preaching flat earth to everybody without revealing Christ to them? Or are we going to be telling them how evil they are because they don't understand what the Catholic Church did to Shabbat, and transformed it? Are we going to lead that way, or are we going to lead with him and meet these people where they're at, and then and then over time disciple them. They're going to, through discipleship, that's when those things change. But, people aren't going to come to the truth when, of anything, if it's forced on them, if it's thrown down their throats, it's like they've got to see Christ living in us to actually want to desire that, right? And I think that's what you guys set out to do every show, right? Even that's what eventually burned you guys out, right?
Even when we didn't want to, we did. Even when we knew that we were at each other's throats. It happens. You get burned out, but the message, the reason why you're there is to minister and to be there for the people that come to your shows. Mm-hmm. Like it or not, you're on a pedestal. Even playing in garages and basements and coffee shops to 5 people in Allentown, Pennsylvania, it's a thing. You've got to understand. God has placed you in that position, and you have to do what God commanded you to do, whether you wanted to or not. And I can guarantee you that there was times where Jesus was tired. There was times when the disciples were tired that didn't want to do it, but they knew that they had to because they were commanded to do it.
Mm-hmm. And look, if you see that comment in there, Melanie said her first concert was Carmen, and one thing with
Carmen.
But the one thing about Carmen, he has always stayed that course. It's like, he's got a message, and he's stuck to that for all these years. And everybody can say what they want about him, whether he's cheesy, whether he's whatever. But
look, as cheesy as Carmen was or is, I will say there was a method to his madness, and the method was minister first, worry about the money later. And because if he's doing what God wants him to do, he would always be able to pay his. Any artist do what Carmen has done with doing free shows in arenas and making well above what he would have ever have made charging to get into a show, because he was doing it for the right, and but he also had his bout with stuff too. I mean, this is a never-ending scenario that we can keep going on.
It's the story of all of our lives, right? It's the story of us.
Right. Well, like I said,
yeah.
I said at Take on the World when I was talking this year that you can believe in flat Earth, you can believe in the Sabbath being on Saturday, you can have all of these things, but if you don't have that relationship, you have nothing. If you don't have that relationship with Christ, you have nothing. If you're not living it and walking it, you have nothing. And the reality is that we go on pretending that, just because we may go to church on Sundays, we do the Sabbath, we do Bible studies, we do this, that's what saves us. What saves us is a constant daily battle of picking up your cross and walking it out, and not being afraid to be what God commanded you to be. And that's something that I've been dealing with for the last few years. And my story. Some of you know my story that we're on Take on the World.
I think this is a great time for you to go into that. This was probably the hardest time, that I've ever dealt with a friend, that I could ever recall in my life, is just having to just talk to you. It was even so hard just to even talk to you, because I didn't know what to say. And obviously it's the worst thing that you ever have gone through, that that you could ever go through. And why don't you start that story from the beginning, and where it took you, to where then it brought you back, because I think, that is extremely important for everybody to hear, because probably somebody out there is dealing with something similar, and you're here right now, just like you're ministering to 5 people in a coffee house in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and you're there for a reason. This is why you're here tonight. We've had a great time just chatting like we normally do. I've got my dishes still in the other room that I have to do. So,
Well, bro,
normally,
you might as well put on your earbuds and go, oh, you got them in.
yeah, right. So,
But
why
and do your
don't you,
bit. I can't hear a word you're saying when you're doing it.
yeah, right. So why don't you start that? Because if you guys missed Doug speaking at Take on the World, this was probably the hardest presentation that I've sat through the whole time. And I made it worse on him because I'm sitting in the front row crying like a baby, which I didn't anticipate, which I knew I was going to cry, but I didn't anticipate every other word, just sitting there like, can't breathe, all that kind of stuff. And, and it will happen every time. So why don't you start that?
Well, I think it's important to understand that my life has always been to minister and to worship God and to do everything unto Him, and not worry about the being liked or the consequences of that. So through my life, I've seen many people through my music stuff come to know Christ. I've done street ministry and all of that. So growing up in the church, you tend to hear things like, if you pray for it, it'll happen. Just ask God for it and He'll give it to you. And I believe those things because that's what I was being preached to. So I like I said before, I was married and then divorced, but during that time I had a little girl. Her name was Skylar. And I ended up getting remarried after her mom and I broke up. And I gave up my life in music be her dad and to have custody of my kid. And giving that up was huge for me because I had no prospect for a real living except for promoting concerts and working in clubs and touring with bands. That was over. We just had a little baby boy, and a year later, my daughter gets diagnosed with brain cancer at 6 years old. Well, long drawn out information about that. She pretty much was healed. She pretty much recovered from the fight. She was supposed to be paralyzed. They didn't even know if she was going to ever talk again because she had brain cancer and the tumor was the size of 6. Did I lose you? Oh, you're showing it. Oh, there we go. So basically what ended up happening was she got healed, went into remission, and at age 11, we go for our last MRI, and they come out and tell me that they found something in that MRI that they noticed in a previous scan that they weren't really worried about, but it had kind of grown. So that was in October 27th of 2010. They said we're gonna let it grow through the holiday. We're gonna see if it grows through the holidays, and on January 3rd we're gonna do another MRI and see what happens. So on January 3rd we go in for an MRI. They said it grew, and it grew exponentially and it ended up being something that they weren't too worried about. They thought it was what they call radiation necrosis, so they did a biopsy. Well, it came back as stage 3, stage 4 astrocytoma glioma, which it's hard to pronounce, let alone try to looking it up back in uh, 2011 when Google and all that stuff is new. And you know, I got this. I read on the World Health Organization that there is no cure, that there's nothing, and that ended up being true. So I at that time owned a business. I owned a chain of cell phone stores, and I closed all of them but one to try to have some income. And what basically happened is that I took that year. I was told that she had 12 to 18 months to live, and I took that year and said, "Forget everything. I'm taking this time to be with my kid, and I'm gonna be there for her." Well, I ended up spending 6 months of her just being in a bed before she ultimately passed away. Oddly enough, Saturday was the 8th-year anniversary of her passing. Now, I say all of this to preface that within that, I ended up going through one of the biggest spiritual battles of my life. And I mean, to the point of, I don't think I ever truly walked away, but there were times where it was questionable if I was ever gonna come back to the faith, because I couldn't believe that God couldn't do this one thing for me that the church always told me, that if you prayed hard enough and you sought hard enough, that God will grant it to you. That's not true, because I distinctly remember, I don't know if I heard God or if it was me, but he said on the cross, you have to walk this out. She has to walk out her situation. I fought with God for, gosh, so the 8th-year anniversary was last Saturday. So probably a good, 7 years, Chris, that fought and I fought and I fought, and I was mad, I was angry. And then, some of my best spiritual discussions about the Bible and God came between our Thursday or Friday night talks, because at that time no one else wanted to talk to me, because I was so, either one day I was so far on one side or so far on the other side. And the reality is that God never promised us anything but grace. He didn't promise us that he would heal everybody. That's because we come from a sinful world. That's, the rain falls on the just and the unjust, and unfortunately, my daughter was a victim of that unjustness. And the reality is that I've stopped blaming God. I've stopped blaming myself. Did I feed her too many chicken nuggets? What did I do wrong for her to, did it happen to be something within my sin that caused her to get cancer and die? And the reality is that we don't control any of that. That's above our pay grade. And the last year or so, I've taken the leave of, I'm no longer going to be somebody that is a bully, because I bullied for a long time my beliefs and what I thought was right, and just allow God to do whatever God's going to do. If I'm meant to talk to somebody, God will work through my being ADD ridden and dyslexic, and He will use me in whatever way He needs to. And I mean, like, you know, all I can say is that it's been one of the hardest things that I think anybody would have to ever walk through. Um, I can't really talk to people that lost their kids because, I mean, they know how I feel because you join that club. But the one thing that I know that I have, excuse me, different than most people is that I had a belief and understanding of God that not a lot of people have. And I've watched people lose their child and their life completely evaporates. They implode. They get divorced. They lose. I mean, I among losing my daughter, the day after she died, I was out looking for a place to live because the sheriff was going to come and board my house up because we were going bankrupt and we lost our house. So we lost our business, we lost our house, we lost our cars, we lost everything that we built. But I wouldn't trade it for the world because I was able to spend that time with my kid and being who she needed at that time. And I'll tell you how I've come back and how I've realized that I was wrong for doubting God is because I'm a way different person than I was even back then. And I've gone into a completely different direction in my life than I ever thought I would. So I just I can't explain it any more than that. It's you know, I would suggest that if you want to get the depthness of what my walk has been like, go back into YouTube and find my testimony that I gave at Take on the World because um, story than that night, and mainly is because I had my friend. I looked at him; he was crying harder, and I was trying not to cry, and that just doesn't work. Um, but it's one of those things where you have to believe that. How do I put it? What I said at Take on the World was that we've surrounded ourselves with man-made doctrines of things like name it and claim it and all of that just to be disappointed, and that's how we lose people instead of actually finding that real relationship with God and seeking out what God said and learning it and understanding it, because God never said that in the Bible. And there's nothing in the Bible that says name it, claim it, and I'll give it to you. Honestly, there was a lot of work involved with with the Israelites, you know, and if you screwed up, you had to start from square one. So I think that's where God took me, was I kept on doubting, I kept on getting angry, and I kept on getting more mad at the situation instead of just realizing that if I would just listen to him and stop trying to do things in my own vein, that um, he would have taken care of it. So, I,
Well, you left out also. You just a little bit later, you lost your mom.
my mom. Hey, hold 1 second.
We knew this was going to happen.
Just hey, I'm I'm actually doing something right now, but I'm actually going to take off for.
We're gonna mute that for a second. Let him come back. So I actually muted you, Doug. Oh, there we go. So we're gonna mute that. So if Doug can continue to hear me, just give me your thumbs up when you're good, Doug. And I can't see your thumbs. So there you go. You're back. Okay. So yeah. So
Cool.
I just wanted to I just didn't want to make sure that important intel didn't leak out. Hey, I'm gonna brag on you for a second. This guy was the security or the bodyguard for Ben Carson here in Ohio during the RNC when it was here in Cleveland a few years back. So Doug's a real life security guy. He does some pretty crazy stuff. He's done some really good stuff.
I've done Ben Carson. At the RNC I did Ben Carson, Kellyanne Conway, and most of the time I spent working with CBS Evening News war correspondent as their bodyguard, and they looked at me and they're like, "Dude, we just came from Turkey where the airport blew up," and they're like, "We were with Navy SEALs," and I'm like, "Don't let this outer exterior weird you out. I'm good to go." And by the end of that week, they wanted me to go with them to the Democratic National Convention, but I just didn't want to be sacrificed, and so taken my life taken that quickly from Hillary.
Yeah. Okay, look, this could be easily the best comment of the night. I'm posting it on this. It only comes from Ian, of course. Who, you know what? I'm good. All right, look, Ian. Man, look, hold on, everybody. I want you guys to see this, okay? So I was like, you know what? Doug was like, this just like spur of the moment. That's how the secret show works. And look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Here's my comment to him, if you can see this. Hey, are you free to do a show? Nope. And he's been in the chat room the whole entire time. Dude, you might just be Paul Blart, man. So I don't know about that. Yeah, of course that's Chadwick. Yeah, and he called you Paul Blart. So,
he called me Paul Blart.
He called you Paul Blart. Yeah. It's a good thing you guys are friends. So
Look at Ian. I will drive to Dayton to show you how Paul Blart I am.
So, but back to the story. You lost your mom.
On the world.
And you lost your mom.
I lost my mom in 15. It was she had surgery, and she never came home. She was 2 days in the hospital after her surgery, and she ended up having a massive heart attack, and she died in my arms just like my daughter died in my arms. And it was very tough. Then a year later, I believe it was, one of my best friends for 30 years died of leukemia and battled through that. So it has not been an easy road for me and my family. And I'm lucky that I actually believe in a God who helps you overcome that, because if I didn't have my faith in God and I didn't have my belief structure, I think I would have just either killed myself or just gone off the grid.
I do think I take that off the screen. And then so this was in your season of of faith, right? And you were getting everything hammered at you at that same time. You had some friends that were tour blasting you at the same time, and then you got me in the background, like reeling it all in. You're like, man, what are my friends doing to me? And then you've got your wife's dad passes away, and then your wife's mom ends up dealing with cancer throughout this season, I mean, your faith was totally being tested, and like how much more could you have handled, right?
Right. Well,
Uh,
all the while trying to rebuild what I had lost.
right.
And unfortunately, as a grown up, we all know we have bills to pay, and so somebody's got to go out and work. And I immersed myself in my work, which became executive protection specialist and investigator. And so I was hardly ever home. I was going to school I got my GED, which was part of the story that I neglected to be able to push, but we could say that for another time. But I got my GED, going to get my undergraduate, and I ended up just immersing myself in other things other than my family and going to church. And, when I did go back to church, we got very involved, and comes out that in one foul swoop, our whole church family left. Our pastors all quit in one day, and all of a sudden the church was disbanded. And then the next church we went to, the preacher got caught having affairs with many women, and basically we left that church. And so for a while there, I'm like, man, it's either me and I'm that black cloud, or I just don't know. I don't know what to do. So the reality is that I just think I need a sabbatical from life, which I still haven't gotten yet. But I can appreciate the fact now that there were people behind me holding my back and praying for me and praying for my family. You and Dirk were pretty much the people that I knew that were in my corner.
Well, the other person that you also had another dear friend too, also die of, I believe, heart attack.
Which I've had several within the last few years.
Was Don?
No. Trying to think.
It's the family that you still fellowship with today.
No, that was Scott. He died of leukemia.
Yeah. Leukemia. That's right.
So, and he was one of the guys, the music. I mean, he was what, 15 years older than me. So when I was 15, he was 30. He was a man of God, and he totally mentored me. And my parents had to have been nuts, because I wouldn't let my 15-year-old son hang out with a 30-year-old guy who's taking you to shows. And we weren't always going to see Christian shows, but we were hanging out, and I was hanging out at his house. I mean, today that would be called ping pong cosmic pizza or whatever it is. That's how
know what that is, right?
Yeah. so people, that's what people would have ultimately thought in today's society. But I wasn't friends with people my own age. I was friends with people that were actually on the front lines ministering. I mean, every Saturday morning I would go and protest in front of a Planned Parenthood. That's what I did for fun. So it was hard to believe that God would let me go through what I went through. But now I understand that it wasn't God. It's just that it's the world we live in because of the sin of man.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, so I want to encourage everybody out there right now. We're all probably dealing with some type of loss, struggle, something that has shaken our faith. And I want to encourage you guys to know that He's faithful, even in those really, really tough times. He is faithful. I kept reminding Doug the whole time. It's like, hey, you're going through something that I couldn't even imagine, but you still you've got three other amazing boys that you're still a dad to, and
Right.
they need you to be strong for them. And I think those gifts that he's, those precious children that he's given us, um, you know, um, they make life a lot easier, right? Just as they're because they don't give you things, right, other than the things that you need, which is love, and unconditionally they love you, right? And those are the things that we need, right? I mean, just to get us through. And good brothers in the faith, and brothers and sisters in the faith, good spouses, and good family. I mean, that's the one thing I want to challenge you guys. I mean, if we're letting topics get in the way of the people that he has in our lives, that he's given you in your lives, your parents, your siblings, your cousins, and they want to be in your life, but you're causing topics to hinder those relationships. If you lead, I'm going to say this, here in this take on the world, we're not shy to these topics that are controversial, right? We talk about biblical cosmology. We talk about not eating pork. We talk about his feast days. We talk about Sabbath. We talk about satanic ritual abuse. We talk about all those things. We want to show people truth, and we want to wake them up. But if those topics are leading us to destroy relationships, maybe we need to take a pause and go back to what we need to be revealing to them, which is Christ in every one of those things. I harp on this all the time. If we're going to spend time teaching people about the feast, show Christ in those feasts. Show them why. And don't get bent out of shape because they go, well, I don't see it yet, and I'm going to still keep Christmas, and I'm going to still keep Easter. Let them figure out their walk. Let them, get in their journey, right? And so I'm going to encourage you guys, if you're losing those, because when it all comes down, and those are the people that you need to get you through these tough times, the people that he has set aside to love you, to encourage you, to just be that person you might need to cry with, and hold tight. But yet, if we're going to strain that relationship, because they may not be somewhere spiritually where you're at, and they may be clinging and holding on to bad doctrines, have a little patience and grace. I mean, that is a fruit of the Spirit, is patience. And, so I encourage you guys to continue to walk in those fruits of the Spirit. Show love, show patience, show mercy, kindness, all of these things towards one another. And, I'll tell you, when you start talking about feast days, and you start talking about Sabbath, and you start talking about these things, they're only going to see the truth. They're only going to see Christ in that stuff. Even biblical cosmology, guys, we got so many people out here, force feeding. I mean, I've done this to Doug a million times, yet we're still talking on the phone. And I've probably flat smacked this dude so much, and probably spoke for hours and hours on end, letting him know that you've been lied to, man. So
it's all good. I mean, but you, like I said before, you can have all of those aspects of your life. You could be preaching biblical cosmology. You could be preaching the no pork, but unless you're doing it with the right heart and doing it for the right reasons, you're just going to fall on deaf ears. And the one thing that I can say honestly is that I respect Chris more than some of the other people that I've met, because he doesn't do it in anger. He doesn't do it to tell you. He does it in love, and he does it to show you where you may be wrong. And that's the thing. Whether it be that stuff or just plainly trying to minister to somebody to come to know Christ, it has to be within the right reasons, and it has to be done the right way. And until you actually are living it out and walking it out and living what you preach, it's just going to fall on deaf ears because people will see who you are. And that's where I lost a lot of my friends, because at the point of when I was going through everything, I was still trying to preach to people and tell them where they were wrong, but I was angrily telling them. I wasn't telling them in love. I wasn't showing them, the grace that has been bestowed upon me. And like Chris said, we need to be able to see the faithfulness. Well, I never realized until later where the faithfulness of God came in until it was too late.
Yeah,
and now I see where
mm-hmm. I mean, look, I'll tell you, knowing you for a long time, I mean, even just those conversations you would have with, you don't do that stuff anymore. Facebook, there was a Facebook Doug for a while. He was militant, man. And in every opinion, everything that he had, he shoved down people's throats. I mean, it was Illuminati stuff at one point. Then no, Illuminati's not real. Then Illuminati is real. 9/11's an inside job. 9/11's not an inside job, man. You went through these things, and you would debate people tooth and nail on all this stuff.
I was just a debate because I had no other aspect to actually fight people, because I wanted to be angry. I wanted to be mad. I wanted to be able to say, you're wrong, I'm right, no matter what side of the aisle I stood on. And that did so much harm to my life. And I've tried to recover from that, and I've tried to fix friendships that were lost because of that. And at some point, when I look at it, it's unfixable unless God wants it to happen.
Yeah, you were the guy posting memes all day, every day. You were either truther Doug with all your memes, trying to rile people up. And then when you gained too many truther fans, you started putting out the contrary stuff to tick those people off. Well, in the background, you still agreed and believed what all the truther people were doing, but you didn't like agreeing with people. And that was that's your challenge, and that's your hardship. But you were losing relationships, and that's exactly what I was talking about. If you're allowing these things, to get in the way, from the relationships that we're called to have, and minister to one another, and allow iron to sharpen iron, or reasoning to happen amongst the brethren, or just even being able to share light with this world, and if we lead with Christ in every action that we do, we can't lose. And it's got to be sincere. It can't be this thing that we force. It has to be truly sincere. And it's just gonna bounce off of us. I mean, we're not gonna call each other names. We're not gonna be mean to one another. Even, look, I'm getting blasted all over the internet. I'm not gonna tell you guys by who. Maybe you found those videos. Well, you could. I've probably told you. No, there are people who say some really bad things about me and Liz, and what? But what's the smart thing to do? Is it for me to create a video and say bad things about them? No, it's pray for them, love them, and yeah, they got bad opinions about what my faith is, and they say bad things about me. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you're always going to find that. And, Doug, you were a guy in that place. I mean, you probably would have had all your choice words for, anybody coming out and saying what you said about Kanye today, even though you're not like giving this guy the A-OK or this or that, right? But you would have been the guy, to make fun of, bash anybody who said anything positive, right? You would have been that guy.
On one side, I probably would have been defending him. And then a day later, I would have been saying, well, you know what? He's not really who he says he is, and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is that, I've learned that it's not up to me to make those decisions. And I'm not going to answer for Kanye. He ain't going to answer for me. I'm not going to answer for Chris. I'm not going to answer for Liz. But what I can say is that unless you know a man's heart and you see their fruit, you can't do that. And so, well, what I was going to say as far as who I once was, my wife would get phone calls from people saying, "Do you know what your husband just said on Facebook?" And my wife is like, "I take no personal responsibility for what he says or what he does. He's in his own little journey, and he's got to come to know who he is, because he has lost what he was. And who I was my foundation was always God, and I lost that. And so in losing that foundation at that point, I lost family, I lost friends, all because I had to be right. And if I can leave anything throughout this whole conversation, is stop trying to prove you're right and just live out what you believe, and let people come to their own understanding, because if they see you living it, they're going to be able to say, now that's the person I want. I believe what they're saying. I believe that what they say is God is who God is. Like, I believe in the feast days. I believe in all that stuff, but I didn't respect it because a lot of the things that I was hearing back in the olden days, and we're talking what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, was nothing but you can't worship Jesus and be doing the feast days. You have to pick a side, because the Jesus that you're worshiping is a counterfeit Jesus, whether that's true or not. Regardless, the people that I saw living it out and walking it out and believing the Torah, living the Torah, and believing what they believed in biblical cosmology, is Chris and Liz. And I know them to be straight up honest people and straight up people that love God. And so I tend to respect what they have to say versus somebody that just is coming at me angrily, and telling me that I'm wrong because I followed, an Assembly God version of Jesus. And the reality is that the realization that, within conflict, at a resolution. And I just chose not to throw any undue conflict on my life anymore, because I was setting myself up to be damaged. I was setting myself up to be hated. I was setting myself up to be separating myself from people, because I didn't want to care about people. I didn't want to love anybody. I mean, I loved my wife and my kids, but I was tanking any kind of relationship because I didn't feel that that I believed in God, and I didn't believe in what the scriptures taught us anymore, because I believed people that believed their own theology instead of what the Bible actually said. And if that's the one thing that I can leave you with, is that you have to just know that if you're not doing it and showing it in the way God wants you to present it, it's not going to work out. It's going to fall on deaf ears. And like I said about Kanye, we have to wait and see. It's all, you have to be able to give somebody time to grow and let that seed either produce good fruit or bad fruit. And we'll be able to notice soon enough that it's either wrong or right. We can go on the whole Illuminati aspect or the Satanism within the music industry, but the reality is that if he is a changed man, and I believe I'm a changed man, that it'll bear good fruit, and it'll bear the fruit that honors God. And I still have ways to go. I still have my up days and my down days. Um, but I believe that God's given me a position through the death of my daughter to be able to share with people what grief is really like and how to actually deal with it in a way that won't self-destruct, because I almost self-destructed myself.
Mhm.
And
Well, I want to give this opportunity to anybody that may want to reach out to you that, might be dealing specifically with, uh, loss, grieving, any of these types of things that just need somebody might pray with them or just understand. Because here's the reality is, you say me and Dirt, helped you out immensely. You know, we didn't, Dirt's a dad of all living kids. My son hasn't had those things. I can't, I can't put myself in your shoes. I couldn't. I
I
could give
wouldn't
you
want
advice.
I wouldn't want you to.
Right, right. But you know what? There are other people out there dealing with exactly. Yes, I do need a chiropractic adjustment. I just saw that come. And that's funny because I do. I actually adjust Doug's back all the time. So that's weird.
You tried to kill me a few times.
Yeah, no, but there are people out there dealing with loss, and they're struggling just like you. And if you would have been able to speak to somebody, that was in your position, who had come out of those things, just somebody to just to talk to, who would understand and fully understand that maybe you would be mad, maybe there's that grieving season, there's people in your life that used to just tell you to get over it, right?
Well, I mean, that was something that I couldn't understand, and something that I still struggle with today, is that I had people that call themselves Christians but didn't have the heart of they had, I mean, honestly, they had no heart, because they would tell me after 2 months after my daughter dying, I can't believe you're still grieving about that. I can't believe you're still, you know, you got to get back on you got to get back on your horse and get your life back. And, you know, and I mean, I grieve daily, man. A song will come on and it'll automatically take me back, and I'll start crying. There were inside jokes that we had. There's things that remind me of my daughter every day. My has a ton of her attributes, but never met her.
Hmm.
So I see her and him all the time. So as far as grief goes, in in the loss of a child, I don't think it'll ever go away. I don't think it can. I mean, I'm faced with it watching her friends grow up and get married and graduate high school, go to prom, go to their first uh, winter formal, or whatever the case may be. Their first, she never got to experience, and thus seeing them live their life out, I'm not experiencing that. My family's not experiencing getting to take pictures for prom or homecoming with her. And yeah, I have 3 other kids, but I mean, I'm just going to be honest. There's a difference between boys and girls, and girls are really, I think, closer to their dads because they're a protector. And when she was dying, she asked for me to take care of her. Not that she didn't love her mother, but she asked for me to take care of her. So when I look at all of this and I hear what the church has said and I hear what people say, they don't know what to say. So therefore they'll say things stupidly like, get over it, or I can't believe you're still grieving and it's been a week, can't you just bury her and go on with it? And it's like, no. But I would say to somebody who's hurting, that's grieving, that don't let that grief control you. don't let the grief take away your life, because you only have this one life. You know, you're not doing yourself any good by um, hiding away. I mean, I have friends that are, you know, they believe differently about me about the rapture and the end times, and they're just waiting for Jesus to come back because their dad died or their husband died, and it's like, I can't live my life like that. There's so much more to do than just sit here and wait. We're commanded, regardless, to go out and be fishers of men. And so you can't do that with having hatred and bitterness in your heart towards God. And I had that. And when I finally realized that that's who I was turning into, and I was becoming a self-destructor, and I needed to take uh, God has called me to be and what God called me to do. And like I said, grief is always going to be there, whether it be a parent or it be a friend that died. You're always going to remember that person. So it's stupid to think that you're going to get over that, especially if somebody made such a huge impact in your life that you can just get over it like they were never there. So I just want to tell you that there is life after grief, but you really don't get over the grief, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if you'd be so kind to share maybe an email address. So if somebody out there who's watching this, maybe tomorrow, a week from now, a year from now, who just needs somebody to pray with, talk to, would you be willing to give out your email? I'll type it up, put it on the screen here. Please don't send Doug, spam emails. Please don't send them, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? This is an opportunity. If you need help, you need someone to talk to and pray for. I know Doug will be there for you. So don't ask him, what he thinks of circumcision or something like that. Trust me, you get some weird emails and like, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for. So would you be so happy to maybe supply me that? And I'll go ahead and put that in the video. So people, if you're out there and you're watching this, I don't care when this is, you could be watching this live 5 years from now, 10 years, as long as YouTube keeps this up there, and Doug's email's active, reach out to him. If you've just lost a parent, you've lost a child, you lost a sibling, you lost a good friend, and you've got no one to turn to, or you just want somebody who understands, I'm going to give you this opportunity to reach out to him. Doug, would you share your email?
It is ENDOF, as in Frank, silence, the number 1, just the numeral 1, at att.net.
Okay, I'm going to put that up on the thing here for you guys. So that's your opportunity right now. We don't typically do that or throw that up there, but if you need that and you're dealing with this, you spoke to somebody at the conference right afterwards, and this person never even made a profession of faith, and you went there to talk about your testimony of coming back to faith from such a horrific event in your life that you deal with every single day. And you were used by Yahweh to lead someone to Christ at the conference. And so, one, that is so amazing. I mean, that is what the conference is intended for, in many ways, whether it's for people to get baptized, people to come to knowledge, come to truth, seek out him, open up his word and study for the first time in their life, and actually somebody come and make a profession of faith, and you got to walk that person through it. And thank you for being a servant. Thank you for coming, offering your words of comfort, when it seems like there is no comfort. And that was pretty amazing. And thank you so much for doing that.
I appreciate the opportunity. I mean, I went from doing security work to being a, a little bit of a speaker for an event that, I never thought that I would actually take part in, because, we've had our ups and downs about it, but the reality is that I applaud you guys for sticking through what you believe. And, the more I listen to Rob Skiba and the more that I see and hear other people talk, it my eyes are opening to other things as well about it. So the more you do it, the more I learn. So keep going with it. But I appreciate the opportunity to actually even just talk about my situation, because a lot of people don't have that platform to do that. And a lot of people just sit there on their couch or sitting there just, not knowing how to deal with what they're going through. And whether it be a death or, a loss of a job or whatever, grief is grief. And, when you get divorced or you lose a job or whatever, you have no way of learning how to handle it in the right way. And the only way to do that is not to let yourself get taken up by bitterness and hatred. And I'm willing to speak and pray with anybody if they need it. And honestly, that's what I hope to do. I mean, um, you know, I'm working on a project, but that'll be forthcoming here after I get my master's degree, and I can have some breathing room. But I've been working on a book for quite a while, and my heart is just to show that God is God no matter what you go through, and the reality is that He never left me, and I may have tried to run from Him, but I couldn't run away far enough.
And if you're out there dealing with that, I want to leave you guys with something before we end. I'm sorry. And the context of what we have to look forward to when the Messiah returns, when he will raise the just and the unjust, when he will come again. We look forward to his blessed hope. His blessed hope is when we will rise. And Titus 2:13 is looking for that blessed hope and the glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior Jesus Christ. Doug, your daughter, she loved him and she accepted him, and you get to look forward to that blessed hope when you will get to see her and you will be reunited. And that's all of our blessed hope, for all of our family, our friends who, that we have lost over these years. That is our blessed hope. Our blessed hope is that He's coming back for us. And that's what makes all this so much more important, that we go out and reach people for Him. Every day, how can we focus on kingdom building? That is so important. There are so many more people He wants to bring into the fold. And He wants to use you as a vessel. He wants to use us as a vessel to reach them. So we have to remain open. We need to walk in His commandments to protect us. Because if we're not walking in those things, we're letting sin creep into our lives, which we happen all the time. He's not going to use us. And He needs to use us for other people. And so that they have that blessed hope, that they can preach that blessed hope to those that are hurting, that have grief. So that's my encouragement for you guys tonight. Thank you so much. This was The Secret Show. This was episode 14. We were watching with our special guest, Doug Kirchner, a friend of mine from forever, for life. Our paths crossed many, many times for reasons for such as a time as this. So thank you guys so much for being here. And hey, continue to help grow Take on the World TV. We got so many shows coming up. We got so many things I can't even tell you. The Reality Distortion Effect season 2 just kicked off with Ian Chadwick. He's going to be building, so watch those episodes because it's going to come full circle when he actually starts doing live videos himself coming up, and he's already gone to bed. So thank you, everybody in the chat room, all you moderators. We love you guys. Thank you for keeping it clean out there and praying for everyone. And we also have a new show that I can't tell you that's coming. It's going to be end times related. So that's coming really, really soon, like probably within like a week or two. And I don't know if I'm going to do another show before FEIC, but pray for me and Michael. We're going to be presenting at FEIC, and we tend to point people back to the truth of Scripture and really show why biblical cosmology is important, and lead people to Christ. So really pray for us, pray for Michael, because he's dragging his feet. If you're watching this live, Michael's dragging his feet on that presentation, which means I'm dragging my feet on that presentation. So I need you guys to pray for us. It is really stressful, but we'll be driving to Dallas. But I will be, if I don't get another episode in before, watch. We're gonna do like 15 like live presentations if we got good internet. Because man, everybody's there. I'm gonna get Nathan Reynolds on a show. I'm gonna get everybody on there. So thanks so much, everybody, for being here tonight. Doug, thank you so much again. And you guys be blessed and have a great rest of your week. Peace. That was my Jared Cressman. Still on. There we go. Shout out to Jared